Mariana was my cousin, the eldest daughter of my Uncle Carlos and Aunt Marta. We were never particularly close, we were too different for that, but she was always kind to me, and I enjoyed our brief chats during family gatherings. From where I stood, Mariana had everything a girl her age could ever want. She went to a private school where she excelled academically. She had a group of friends who were just as pretty and popular as she was. At 14, she seemed completely untouched by the awkwardness of adolescence. Beautiful, cheerful, charismatic. She lit up every room she walked into. Her parents were the most financially comfortable in the family. She lacked nothing. That's why the night we received a call from my grandfather saying that Mariana had taken her own life, the world seemed to collapse around us. I still remember. My father rushed us into the car within minutes, driving like a man possessed straight to Uncle Carlos's house. The whole family was already there, broken, shattered. Nobody could believe it. The police were still inside, neighbors whispering and gathering outside the home. It was Marta who later told us what had happened. While she and my uncle were out visiting friends, Mariana had been at home, getting ready for a party. Their younger daughter, Lucia, had just been dropped off after swim practice by a friend's mother. She was 8 years old. But when she walked into the house that evening, instead of her big sister waiting by the door, she stumbled upon the most horrific sight a child could imagine. Mariana was hanging by the neck from the balcony of her parents' bedroom, right above the entrance, still in her school uniform. Every death is tragic. But this one destroyed our family. It took a very long time before any of us could return to something resembling a normal life. Mariana's image was constantly in our minds. For me, the nightmares lasted months. I dreamed of that scene as if I had seen it myself, her lifeless body hanging there. My uncle and aunt's marriage didn't survive much longer either. Within a year they had separated. Uncle Carlos moved to the United States, where his family was originally from, and Aunt Marta relocated to Querétaro. The house where it happened, once full of life, became an unbearable burden. It was hers by law, but in truth, it was nothing more than a cruel reminder of what she had lost. Around that time, my father was looking for a small apartment as an investment. But since Marta was his sister, she offered him her house for a price far below its real value. At first, my father refused. He didn't want to take advantage of her grief. But my grandfather insisted. "It's better this way," he told him, "for everyone." So my father finally accepted. He bought the house, remodeled it, and tried renting it out for months. No one stayed. By the time I was about to start high school, my parents wanted me to attend a better school, a private one. And, of course, it turned out to be the very same school Mariana had attended. That was already difficult enough to swallow. But then came the second blow. Because of the school's location and my parents' work, the most convenient solution was for us to move into that house. Mariana's house. I begged them not to make me live in her room. It was every girl's dream bedroom, spacious, beautifully decorated. But I couldn't do it. I simply couldn't. So I chose the smaller one next door instead. Lucia's old room, which had since been used as a storage space, full of boxes and things my aunt and uncle had left behind. The first night I was so exhausted from the move that I fell asleep surrounded by all those forgotten objects and memories of better days. I tried to calm myself, to forget the nightmares, to push away the thought that just a few meters from where I lay years ago, Mariana had taken her last breath. I had barely closed my eyes when a sound jolted me awake. Footsteps, coming from Mariana's room. At first, they were faint, soft creaks across the wooden floor. But soon they grew louder, clearer. Someone was walking in there. I froze, terrified. My parents' room was down the hall, and to reach it I would have to pass right by Mariana's door. I can't describe the fear I felt, especially when I heard the slow creak of a door opening. Then heavy steps, moving down the hallway, stopping right outside my room. I forced myself to open my eyes, and under the door, I saw the shadow of someone standing there. Then the doorknob began to turn. Seconds, or maybe just fractions of a second, passed. But to me, it felt like an eternity. The door opened, and standing there was my father. Relief washed over me, but it was mixed with something darker, a lingering fear I couldn't explain. He looked pale. He switched on the light and, in the most serious tone I've ever heard from him, asked me, "You weren't the one walking just now, were you?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. And so, at 15 years old, I let my father carry me in his arms like a child, straight into my parents' room, where my mother was still awake with the light on. "I heard it too," I whispered. My mother, always the rational one, always the skeptic, tried to explain. She said that sometimes strong emotions leave behind an energy in the places where tragedies happen. But even she didn't sound convinced of her own words. The next day, my father spoke with Aunt Marta, and she confirmed what we already feared. Others had heard the same thing. The movers, for example, had sworn they heard the footsteps of a girl in the upstairs bedroom, even a voice humming a tune. Aunt Marta believed Mariana was still there, in one form or another. She told my father it was simply too painful for her to live in that house, the place where she had lost everything. That's why she had sold it to him at such a low price. "If there's anything left of her in that place," she said, "I'd rather it stay with someone who truly loved her." Then she looked at him and added, "I won't blame you if you decide not to live there. I couldn't do it myself. But if you can, please, hermano, don't leave her alone in that house." When my father told us this conversation, it almost sounded logical, at least within the deep grief our family carried. And so we accepted, all of us, without really knowing what we were getting ourselves into. The first weeks were unsettling. We heard footsteps upstairs, especially in the afternoons. At first, we forced ourselves to treat it as something normal. We learned to live with it. But at night, when the house was silent, the sound of those steps chilled my blood. For us, it was bearable. But visitors didn't last long. Take Dona Andrea, for instance, the kind lady who helped with cleaning a few times a week. One day, she simply stopped showing up. Wouldn't answer calls, wouldn't reply to messages. My mother grew worried and went looking for her. She barely knew her address, so she had to ask around the neighborhood until finally she found her. Dona Andrea, embarrassed, explained why she hadn't come back. It wasn't because of us. It was because of what lived in that house. She told my mother that whenever she was alone, as she swept the floors, she would hear footsteps following right behind her, never letting her feel alone. One day, without knowing, she opened Mariana's bedroom. The room had been left almost exactly as Mariana once had it. She said that the moment she stepped inside, she was overwhelmed by a crushing sadness, a despair so deep she had to shut the door immediately. And then came the final straw. The last day she ever set foot in that house, she swore she felt two invisible hands push her from behind, right at the top of the staircase. She stumbled, nearly fell, but managed to catch herself before rolling down. Terrified, she shouted into the empty house that she was leaving and would never come back, and she never did. My mother tried to calm her, telling her that we too had heard and seen things, that we understood. But Dona Andrea shook her head.
No, señora.
You're wrong. That's no little girl wandering around that house. At that exact moment, I came out of my room to greet my friend Paula, who had just arrived to visit. And very soon, we would both realize that Dona Andrea was right. I was happy when I heard the doorbell. Finally, Paula had agreed to visit my new house. We'd been best friends since elementary school. But now, for the first time, we would be attending different schools. She was still upset about that, even though I had explained 100 times it wasn't my choice. When I opened the door, she waved cheerfully from the garden. I ran down to greet her. My parents weren't home, so I wanted to take the chance to talk. Really talk about everything that had been happening in that house. Things too strange to explain over the phone. I led her into the garden. My Aunt Marta had always had a gift for design, and her patience and creativity were evident in every corner. As I turned to show Paula the fountain, she suddenly let out a startled scream, followed almost immediately by a laugh. "What happened?" I asked. "Your dad nearly gave me a heart attack," she said. "My dad? What do you mean?" "He was looking out from the upstairs window, wearing some horrible mask. I swear, he scared me half to death." At that moment, my blood ran cold. I didn't want to turn. I didn't want to look at that window. Which one? I asked. That one. The one in the middle. My knees nearly gave out. She was pointing straight at Mariana's room. Stop it. That's not funny, I said, tears welling in my eyes. I'm serious.
Paula insisted.
I saw him. It was so real. I thought he was just trying to mess with us. We both looked up. The curtains were half open, which was strange, because none of us ever touched them. And then, a shadow crossed the room, moving quickly across the ceiling as if someone was walking inside. I can't explain it. The shadow was only a vague silhouette, but deep down I knew. It was Mariana's. Paula clutched my arm, trembling, and in that instant, the curtains dropped violently, as if ripped down by unseen hands. We screamed, ran out into the street like maniacs. One of the neighbors rushed over, worried, asking what had happened. Paula was the one who managed to speak. There's someone inside the house. The neighbor signaled to another man who had just parked nearby. Together, they grabbed a tire iron from the car and entered through the garden. Paula pointed them to the window where she had seen the figure. The men froze for a second, realizing which room it was. They knew very well that above that very spot, Mariana's lifeless body had once hung for hours until her sister found her. Still, they went in. Paula followed close behind. I couldn't, because deep down I knew. I knew what they would find, or rather what they wouldn't. Minutes passed, and they still hadn't come back down. I gathered what little courage I had and went inside. On the stairs, I nearly collided with Paula, who was pale and frantic, whispering into her phone, calling the police. There's someone in there, she gasped. We saw them run into the closet. I could hardly believe it. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to feel relief, to think it was just a burglar. But another part of me knew better. I hurried into the room. The two neighbors were pulling at the enormous closet doors, yelling threats at whoever was hiding inside. Come out, you bastard. Before the police get here and things get worse. They tugged and pulled with all their strength, nearly hanging off the handles. But the doors wouldn't budge. Just then, the sound of the garage gate opening distracted us. My parents were home. One of the neighbors glanced through the window and told me to go meet them. But before I could leave, a chilling noise stopped us all. The closet doors began to creak open. Slowly, very slowly, we stepped back, holding our breath. The man with the tire iron raised it, ready to strike. The doors opened fully. Inside, nothing. Just silence. The neighbors tore through the clothes, searching frantically. Over and over again. But the more they searched, the paler they became. There was no way anyone could have been hiding there. My mother came running upstairs, alerted by Paula. When she saw our faces, she didn't ask much. She simply closed the closet, drew the curtains, and firmly told us all to leave the room. We obeyed. She stayed behind, speaking quietly with the neighbors. Half an hour later, they came down together. One of them slipped her a piece of paper, insisting that he knew someone who could help us. The other remained silent, his face drained of all color. My mother thanked them and walked them to the street. When she returned, she froze in the garden. Her eyes locked on Mariana's window. Paula followed her gaze. The curtain, which my mother had just closed, was now slightly open. Didn't you see me shut it? My mom asked. Yes, Paula whispered, and then I saw it. In the gap of the curtain, a face. Not pale, not humanly pale, completely white, with eyes sunken into black, hollow circles. It was watching us. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and if my mother or Paula saw it too, they said nothing. My mom finally turned away. Let's go inside, she said. Her voice was steady, almost angry. Once the door was closed, she spoke louder, not just to us but to whatever else might be listening. This is our house now. Ours. We paid dearly for it, and we will live here. If anyone has a problem with that, they can leave. But no one will drive us away. There was fire in her voice. And strangely, her defiance brought me a strange sense of peace. For the first time, it felt like someone in our family wasn't afraid. That evening, when Paula's parents came to pick her up, the heavy silence in our house finally broke. My parents were arguing. It wasn't like their usual disagreements. Their voices were sharp, urgent, both of them desperate to decide what to do. My mother, ever the rational one, insisted there was nothing to fear. "When have you ever heard of a ghost physically harming someone?" she said. "Yes, there are noises. Yes, we've seen things. But fear can't drive us out of our own home." My father, though, wasn't convinced. Frustrated, he slammed open a drawer near the entrance and pulled out an old pack of cigarettes. One I hadn't seen in years. He hadn't smoked in forever. He stepped outside to light one. My mother followed. I stayed behind, listening at the door. "We can leave," my father muttered between drags of smoke. "Put up a rental sign. If it rents, fine. If not, we'll figure it out. But we don't have to stay here." "Don't be ridiculous, Ernesto," my mother snapped. "Why would we leave? Out of fear? Do you really think running away will change anything?" Her words hung heavy in the night, and then silence, because in that moment, they both realized exactly where they were standing. Right beneath the spot where Mariana had been found hanging. The footsteps never stopped. Some were heavy, echoing through the hallways at night. Others lighter, softer, almost like a girl walking during the day. Those I always thought were Mariana's. But no matter what, the steps always came from the same place. Her room. I was relieved when school finally started. At least I'd have somewhere to focus, new people to meet, something to distract me from the constant unease inside that house. My mother had already befriended the woman across the street, whose son, Luis Alberto, went to the same school I was about to attend. She thought it would be a good idea for me to talk to him beforehand, so I'd at least have one familiar face in those first days. But what I learned from him only pulled me deeper into the darkness surrounding Mariana's story. When we met, the very first thing he said was, "You know, Mariana was in my class since elementary school." I froze. No one had told me that. Luis Alberto was a nice guy, though a little odd. Because of his strange sense of humor, he didn't have many friends. Just a small group of kids as eccentric as he was. Mariana, of course, was the opposite. She was radiant, popular. Everyone in the school knew her. They were never close, though they occasionally walked to school together if one of their parents gave them a ride. Still, he had noticed things others hadn't. He knew details about her final weeks. And I was about to learn far more than I ever wanted to know. "Have you ever felt anything strange in that house?" he asked me one afternoon, his voice cautious. I froze again. "Why do you ask?" He sighed. "Because my little brother sometimes wakes me up at night, begging to sleep in my room. He says there's a girl hanging in the window across the street. In your house." I was speechless. "My mom scolds him whenever he says that," Luis continued. "She thinks I told him about what happened, but I didn't. I swear. I never said a word. And that's what bothers me. He shouldn't know any of this." The chill that ran through me in that moment was unbearable. Because my parents had been very careful not to talk about Mariana's death. Not even with neighbors. And yet, Luis's little brother had described exactly what none of us dared to speak aloud. When I finally walked into the school on my first day, the weight of Mariana's memory was everywhere. Everyone knew her. Everyone knew what had happened. And they all knew who I was, her cousin, now living in her house. People avoided me. Some even looked at me with fear, as if speaking to me might invite something terrible into their lives. No one wanted to get close.
Except Luis Alberto.
He invited me into his small group of friends, who were obsessed with comics, trading cards, and strange music I'd never heard before. And little by little, I started to learn more about what had haunted Mariana in her last days. One afternoon, during lunch break, one of Luis Alberto's friends, Tony, looked straight at me and said, "We knew something was going to happen with your cousin." He was a tall, heavy-set guy, with a baby face and patchy stubble that made him look older than he was. Somehow, he was the leader of their little group. "She came to us once," he continued, asking questions about some things she'd found online. "What kind of things?" I asked. "Videos," Tony said flatly. "Weird ones. You'll see." The others nodded. Mariana had strange tastes. One of them added, "She wasn't into the dark web or anything." No, these were videos anyone could stumble upon. But they were hidden in plain sight, with nonsense titles full of random letters and numbers. And yet, somehow she found them, and they messed her up. Badly. Luis Alberto stayed silent the whole time. He didn't argue, didn't correct them, just listened, his expression heavy. Later, when it was just the two of us walking home, I asked him why he hadn't spoken. Because it wasn't just suggestion, he told me. People don't kill themselves over suggestion. Your cousin had everything, friends, family, money. Yes, some say she was upset because one of her best friends started dating her ex-boyfriend. But do you really think that was enough to drive her to suicide? He paused, as if regretting what he was about to say. Then, suddenly, he stopped walking, turned, and headed back in the opposite direction, leaving me alone with 1,000 questions swirling in my head. When I got home that afternoon, the house felt heavier than usual. I was setting my backpack down when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of furniture being dragged across the floor upstairs. "Mom? Dad?" I called out. No answer. I checked my phone, they weren't home. The dragging stopped. Then came footsteps in the hall. I bolted straight to the backyard, choosing to do my homework outside rather than face whatever was waiting in those rooms. I was still trembling when my mom arrived, and with her a new helper, a girl named Hortensia. At the same moment, I saw Luis Alberto coming home across the street, this time with one of his friends. They waved at me to come over, and that's when the truth began to surface. We went upstairs together. Hortensia stayed with my mom in the kitchen, while Luis and his friend followed me into the hallway. They stopped right outside Mariana's room. "That's her room, isn't it?" Luis asked, pointing at the door. "Yes," I whispered. "Then we need to be in there." I froze, but they didn't wait for my answer. They stepped inside. Tony's friend spoke first, his voice uneasy. "Your cousin didn't care about her boyfriend or her friends. That wasn't the real reason she pulled away. What really happened is that she got obsessed with these bizarre chat rooms. She was always online, talking to someone." Then he yanked the curtains open. "This window," he said.
Luis nodded.
"Yeah, that one." From there, you could see his own house across the street, his little brother's room directly facing ours. Luis turned to me, his expression heavy. "I haven't told you everything. I wanted to protect you, but you deserve to know." He took a deep breath. A few weeks before it happened, Mariana's messages started getting strange. She'd text me in the middle of the night, and in the morning she'd swear it hadn't been her. Sometimes she sent complete nonsense. Random characters, unfinished words, like something else was typing through her. And one night, she sent a photo, a selfie. Her face was serious, almost blank. But behind her, there was a huge black silhouette, like someone had tried to run out of frame at the last second. I ran to my brother's room to look across at this window, and I saw something standing here. At first I thought it was Mariana, standing on a chair, maybe fixing the curtain. She looked taller than usual, her head nearly at the top of the frame. But she didn't move. She just stood there. Then, a moment later, Mariana herself walked into the room, and I realized the thing at the window wasn't her. It wasn't human at all. It was massive, a shadow, something that bent unnaturally as it crouched down. And then, Luis's voice broke. And then a face appeared, grinning, like a mask, a horrible, twisted mask, staring at me from this very window. I felt the blood drain from my face, because what he had just described was exactly what Paula had seen days earlier. The same window, the same mask, and now there was no denying it. That same evening, a message arrived from Luis Alberto. It was a blurry photo, badly cropped, but the shape was unmistakable. A figure at Mariana's window. "We're across the street in my sister's room," the message read. "There's someone standing in Mariana's window, right now." I begged Luis and his friend to come over. Together with Hortensia and my mom, we went upstairs to check. The moment we opened the door, we were hit by a stench so foul it made us gag. filled the entire room. We followed the source to the bathroom attached to Mariana's bedroom. The smell was coming from the sink. It was unbearable, thick, nauseating, like something rotten, something dead. Luis tried to check, but Hortensia pushed him aside, determined. She fetched what she needed and began cleaning. Luis stood by her side, pale, while the rest of us waited at the door. Moments later, Hortensia screamed. Luis doubled over and vomited. We rushed in. Inside the drain, Hortensia had pulled out a mass of tangled blonde hair. Long golden strands matted together with what looked like clotted blood. The stench was overwhelming. We all fought the urge to vomit. That photograph of the mask at the window haunted me for months. I kept it on my old computer. Once, I even stumbled upon it posted in a paranormal forum, though the uploader claimed it had been taken in another city. Hortensia stayed with us for just a week. Then her sister came to take her home. We heard later that ever since working in our house, Hortensia had become too sensitive to dark things. She swore she constantly felt a girl's presence there. She believed it was Mariana. She said she sometimes saw Mariana's reflection behind her when cleaning near mirrors or glass cabinets. She kept finding strands of blonde hair in sinks all around the house. And one day, something yanked her hair so violently she screamed. My mother was in the kitchen and tried to calm her down, but that was the last straw. Hortensia left, and she never came back. We couldn't blame her. First, Dona Andrea had fled, feeling the presence of something else. Now Hortensia, convinced it was Mariana herself. Each of them had felt something different, but all of them had felt something. Not long after, one of Mariana's old friends began talking to me. She had fallen out with the rest of her group and decided that the best way to get back at them was to befriend me, to sit with the cousin they all treated like an outcast. She admitted that to me later once we truly became friends. But through her, I began to understand more of Mariana's final weeks. She told me Mariana had been drifting away from them for some time. She stopped spending weekends with the group. Something was wrong and they all knew it. But instead of helping her, they ignored it. When I told this girl about Luis Alberto and his friends' stories, about the strange videos, she laughed bitterly. "So Tony told you that, huh?" she said. "Of course he did. That fat idiot was the cause of it all." Her words stung. I felt lied to, manipulated. I asked her to come with me to confront Luis. When we got to my house, I called him over. He arrived minutes later. I asked him directly if what Tony had said was true. At first, Luis denied everything, swore it was a misunderstanding. But then my new friend stepped out from the bathroom, where she'd been hiding, to overhear him. Luis turned pale. "All right," he said. "All right, I haven't told you the whole truth, but I didn't want to drag you deeper into this." My friend gave a sarcastic smile. "Too late for that. Haven't you noticed what she's living with? What she has to face every night in that house?" Her words cut deep, because she was right. Apparently, Tony had always had a darker side. Not just the kids in his group knew it, but many others in the school. Even some teachers whispered about it. But no one really knew what he was involved in. Only that he was obsessed with those bizarre videos and the club behind them. And somehow Mariana had been pulled into it. Later, my friend confided something else. After Mariana's death, her old group of friends had started receiving Facebook messages from Mariana's account. The messages contained photos, distorted photos of her. Pictures with each of them, but with her face twisted into grotesque, almost demonic expressions. They all thought it was some cruel prank. But then the messages grew personal. Whoever was sending them began revealing secrets only Mariana could have known. The group panicked. They all blocked her account. I hated opening her profile, but when they showed me the messages, I saw the photos, even some with me in them. For a second, I wanted to reply, just to see what would happen. But in the end, I reported the account. Eventually, Facebook deactivated it. Luis was convinced it had been Tony behind the whole thing, but there was no proof. The very same day the account was shut down. The noises in Mariana's room became unbearable. Footsteps, doors creaking, water running from the bathroom taps. And worse, That night, as I tried to fall asleep with my headphones on, I suddenly heard crying. A girl's sobs, coming from Mariana's room. Then the sound of someone running and leaping out the window. I froze. I didn't understand what I had just heard. The sobs, the running, the sound of someone jumping. Then came a crash in the yard, near the trash bins. I forced myself to look outside, and there he was, Tony, standing in the darkness, staring straight at Mariana's window, unmoving, unblinking. For a moment, everything felt clear. He was behind it all. He had been inside the house in her room just seconds before. He must have jumped. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted down the stairs and into the yard, ready to confront him. But as soon as I reached the garden, Tony sprinted away, vaulting over the fence with terrifying speed. I was about to chase him when something behind me made my blood freeze. A shadow, right next to me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. Feet, dangling. Mariana's feet, hanging there. My body went numb. Ants crawled across my skin. My legs refused to move, even as the hanging figure drifted closer. Step by step, those lifeless feet swung toward me. I wanted to scream, to run, to look away, but I couldn't. Finally, pure terror gave me strength. I bolted inside, racing up the stairs in 3 strides, pounding on my parents' locked door. Behind me, I could hear it, the sound of something dragging down the hallway, coming for me. The door opened, and I hurled myself into my mother's arms, begging them to close it. "There's something in the hall," I cried. They couldn't see it, but I knew. When my father looked out the window, he frowned. "There are lights on across the street," he said, "at Luis Alberto's house. Strange. They usually go to bed early." I messaged Luis immediately. "Is everything okay?" The reply came quickly. "No." That night, the lighter footsteps returned, pacing, circling, never letting me sleep. Later, I learned that Tony had gone to Luis's house right after fleeing mine. He had woken Luis up, handed him a crumpled piece of paper filled with hastily scribbled YouTube links, and muttered the same words over and over. "You'll understand. You'll understand." Then he disappeared into the night. Luis swore that as he turned back toward my house, he saw something among the branches and shadows. Mariana, hanging, in the very same place where she had ended her life. I didn't dare open the links Tony had left. Just seeing them, strings of random numbers and letters scribbled on paper, filled me with dread. I knew they led to YouTube, but I couldn't bring myself to watch. Luis did. He showed them the next day to a close friend from his group. And that was when things truly began to unravel. Tony never came back to school. Teachers asked. Students whispered. But no one knew where he had gone. The school administration did review the links, though not the police. They weren't interested in reopening a case, not even if Mariana's suicide might have been influenced, or even induced, by someone else. Luis told me they went to Tony's house, but only his older brother was there. He said he didn't know where Tony had gone. A few weeks later, tragedy struck again. Luis's little brother, the same one who had seen the girl hanging in my window, took his own life. I never asked how. I didn't want to know. All I knew was that it was Luis who found him. After that, Luis disappeared too. He left his house. His parents moved away days later. He deleted his Facebook account, or maybe he blocked me. He never came back to school. He never spoke to me again. After that, things in our house began to quiet down. The heavy footsteps at night grew rarer. The violent crashes stopped. But silence didn't mean peace. The house still held its weight, its presence. We learned to live with it, or at least to pretend we did. Time passed. The house grew calmer, or at least that's what we told ourselves. There were no more violent crashes, no more footsteps shaking the halls. But that didn't mean it was over. Last Halloween, a boy I was seeing came to pick me up. He knew nothing about Mariana, nothing about what had happened in that house. And yet, as we left, he casually mentioned something strange. "I saw someone," he said, pointing to the garden. "A figure, crouching there. We hadn't decorated. We never decorated for Halloween. I laughed it off, pretended it was nothing. For a while I almost believed it. Then one evening, not long after, I came home around 7. The sun had just gone down. I glanced at the house across the street, Luis Alberto's old home. His family was long gone, and in the upstairs window I saw it. A face, not pale, not human, a red demon's face, its eyes black voids, watching me through the glass. Even now, I can't say for certain what Mariana left behind, or whether it was ever really her at all. But I know this much: whatever lingers in that house, it never left.